Obviously, you had the choice of playing Laurel or Hardy. How did you decide on?
You know, it's funny. That was always the conundrum because I was obsessed with these guys for my whole life. To me, Laurel and Hardy have always been there. And when I was in college, a friend of mine and I were really kind of like work on their routines a little bit, but we could never decide who was going to be Stan and who was going to be Ollie. We were both skinny, so I think we both wanted to be Stan. But anyway, I got to play Ollie eventually.
And then there's the transition from watching them to playing one of them, and then to play with Steve Coogan. And you don't want to imitate, but you want to evoke. How do you draw that line?
Well, we wanted to imitate a little bit. We wanted to imitate enough so that you were like, oh, yeah, those guys. But I have to say it was a very intimidating prospect, given how much I watched their films and how important they were to me. The idea that I suddenly would be taking on this character and trying to portray him and replicate him for people was, at first I was just like, no, I just lost 30 pounds. You got the wrong guy. And he said, would you put weight on for it? I was like, no. So it was an awesome responsibility, not just because it would be a difficult job, because everyone's so familiar with what the guy sounded like and what he looked like, but because of the legacy to me personally of what these guys meant to me. I did not want to do anything that would get in the way of, appreciation for these guys, and I wanted to add to them and point back to them. And that's one of the reasons, I've had to do a lot of this, Pat, the past few months for a lot of different movies. Since September, I've been doing promotion for different things. But talking about this one in particular, it really feels great because in a way I'm able to step out of the conversation and say it's about these guys. And when I watch the movie, I get really moved by the movie. I don't think I've cried more at one of my own movies ever than when I saw this one for the first time. And it was not because I was so moved by my own performance, but wasn't it great? No. No, please, that was a joke. But because it evokes memories of these guys, and these are not just characters, these are people that were very important people to me. And so when I watched the film, it pulls that out of me. It makes you realize what it must have felt like to be them. What an amazing life these guys had. And if you think about it as a performer, Steve and I, we felt in some ways qualified to play these guys because we've been performers our whole lives too. But what's different about them, and different than I can't really think of another performer other than like circus people or something, where people started their careers together and they did every single thing together. Their identity, their professional identity was only the two of them together. And if they were apart, if they were in public, where's the other guy? People people wanted them together. So I don't know. It must have been a really. We explored a little bit in the movie, and it was just what an interesting life and what a miraculous partnership. And to think that Hal Roach, this producer who was just trying to make a buck in the business, he lost Harold Lloyd because Harold Lloyd got wise and thought, I can have my own studio. I don't need to be sharing all the profits with Hal. Hal was just looking for his next star, and he pulled these guys out of nowhere. They didn't know each other, and he stuck them together and said, come up with an act, boys. The fat one and the skinny one, that'll be funny. And as a result of that random decision, one of the most miraculous partnerships in the history of humankind. I hope I'm not overstating it, but I really do believe that. A partnership. It's a miraculous partnership. So, what an interesting thing to get to talk about.
Did you spend time with him before?
Yeah, so I was doing a movie called Holmes and Watson before we shot this. Actually, this movie got pushed by that movie. I had this awful phone call to make, guys, the good news is I still want to do the movie. The bad news is were going to do it 4 months later, but they were great about it, and actually allowed John Baird, the amazing director of this film, who was the leader of it from beginning to end. It gave him time to figure it out. But so, sorry, Pat. I do talk.
They're not going anywhere. We're good.
So, but to answer your question, so while I was doing Holmes and Watson, I would come on the weekends on my days off and work for hours with Steve on the way out west dance and singing and doing some of these routines. In the script it would say they do a double door routine. Well, thanks a lot. Yeah, great. We'll follow this to the letter. So then we had to come up with this double door routine or the routine at the hotel clerk's desk with the bells. All of that stuff it's meant to look very nonchalant. And of course, when the masters, Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy did it, it did look like they were doing it for the first and only time. It just seemed like so thrown off. But when you get into that stuff and you start to do it, then that's when you realize what masterful craftsmen these guys were. It wasn't an accident, and it wasn't just chemistry, and it wasn't nonchalant. It took hours and hours and hours because I did it. And in order to do something like the double door routine, even something as simple as passing that bell back and forth with the right rhythms, it takes a lot of practice so that you can get it hardwired into your brain and then forget it, and then it does start to seem nonchalant, but you're like, for instance, that double door routine we're doing in our heads, we're going while we're looking nonchalant, we're going 5, 4, 3, 2, turn, wait, 2, 4, turn, like that in our heads, like a musical score. For it to work, is the whole gag of
chorus line.
The near misses of it. Yeah.
The prosthetic chin, does it have an agent?
I'll tell you what, we call them the cutlets because they were pretty darn big. It wasn't just a chin; it was a lot of my head.
They had to plug you into a coolant, right, between scenes because your suit was so.
Yeah, I mean, you can die in those things. Listen, if you cover up enough of your skin with rubber and you pack the rest of it with insulation, you better cool off or you're going to perish. So, yeah, they have this cooling suit, these tubes that went all around on a T-shirt, and then you plug it into this cooler with a pump, and it pumps cold water on these tubes. I've never done hard drugs, but I think that might be what it feels like. And it wasn't just to keep me cool. It was because they need to minimize the amount that I'm sweating, or that stuff just starts to, come off. But, I'm glad you mentioned the makeup because I had a lot of help. It wasn't, I found the inside of this guy myself, but the outside of him, I had a lot of help finding. And Mark Coulier, the amazing prosthetics guy who did this, there's this detail that unless you're in the makeup business or you're an actor that's watched people do it, it might be lost on you, which is sticking these cutlass things on, gluing all that on is one thing. That's one sculpture that you then reproduce and you glue to someone. It's the painting of it. The painting of it is like Caravaggio level. The layers of it, and they dip these brushes into like an alcohol-based paint, and then they flick them like this, so tiny, tiny little drops of paint are going on your face, layer after layer after layer after layer, until I'm in the mirror going, wait, that feels like skin. That's me, and that's not me. Okay, that's not me. That's how convincing it was. So each step of the way, at first I had to have the courage to say, okay, I'll try. And then, then you see the mock-up of the CGI of the makeup, before they start sculpting it, okay, well, that looks like him. And, then Steve and I start working, okay, well, we got that part of the dance done, and each thing was a small little victory. And, I just kept telling myself, you don't have to do the whole thing at once. You just have to do this scene today. And that's what kind of got me through the awesome responsibility of it, And the good company of Coogan. He's really fun. He's very, very funny.
Please thank John C. Reilly for giving us back Oliver Hardy.